Hi everyone, I am Chirag Thakkar, Commissioning Editor at Rolly Books, and this is Rolly Pulse brought to you by Rolly Books. Welcome to our specially curated series, Publishing Perspectives, where we bring together our peers from the publishing ecosystem to facilitate exchange and cross pollination of ideas. Remember, you can check out all our previous sessions on our YouTube channel, Rolly Books, which, if you haven't yet subscribed to, please go do so now. You can also find our content on Instagram, that is IGTV, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want us to put out more such content, then please show us your love. Type in your comments in the comment section below and share this with your peers, your friends, and anyone you wish to. This is the ninth episode of Publishing Perspectives, and today's conversation is on young professionals in the publishing industry and how we make sense of this world. And I'm very pleased to welcome our speakers for today, Shubhi Surana, Aritra Paul, Shreya Pandey, Sonali Jindal, and Arpita Das. Shubhi Surana is an editor at Wonder House Books, an imprint of Prakash Books. A lawyer by training, she's been associated with publishing since 2015 and was previously editor of the literary and lifestyle magazine Lit Gleam. Aritra Paul works as assistant editor and digital marketeer at Sri Samya Books. She also writes and conducts workshops on various issues related to the LGBTQIA community and feminism, and enjoys writing reviews on books, cinema, and comics. Shreya Pandey is an assistant editor at Penguin Random House India. She's a popular writer on digital publishing and reading platform Wattpad and has authored a young adult novel that has garnered over 13 million views. We're joined by Sonali Jindal. Sonali is an editor at DK Books India. Shubhi, Aritra, Shreya, and Sonali are going to be in conversation with Arpita Das. Arpita runs the New Delhi-based independent publishing house Yoda Press. She is visiting faculty at Ashoka University and also runs the Yoda Press workshop series for authors and editors. She writes regularly for different platforms and periodicals on book and popular culture and on gender. So welcome to Rolly Pulse, each of you. Arpita, why don't you get us started with the discussion?
Thanks so much, Chirag, and it's really an honor and a delight to be part of this series of discussions. A lot of us in the industry have been watching, this series of conversations that have started on Rolly Pulse, and for someone like me, it's really exciting to be able to sort of see a lot of publishing colleagues, a lot of publishing comrades getting together and discussing things which a lot of us think about, but we don't discuss as much as maybe we should, unless it's the book fair or JLF or Franklin Book Fair. So I thought I'd add my little bit to the series. And I'm really delighted, as a matter of fact, to have this opportunity to curate and to moderate this particular panel. But first of all, I have to start by wishing all of you a very good evening and a warm welcome to Rolly Pulse, a digital initiative in Rolly Books. This is a topic really close to my heart because the Indian publishing industry has often been accused of being dominated by boomers, as my daughter would put it, and that's not very far from the truth. It goes without saying that we've learned a lot from people who are iconic in this industry and have sort of, kind of laid certain path-breaking paths to new ventures, new avenues, new approaches. And a lot of us feel that we would not have been here had it not been for these people. But to my mind, and I think a lot of us feel this way in the industry now, we also want to know, we're very keen to know what the young people in our industry feel about various things, particularly in this absolutely bizarre and unprecedented time which the lockdown is there. So I'm delighted to have four feisty and articulate publishing professionals, young publishing professionals here with me. And I'm going to get started with a question, first of all, with Aritra. I'm going to try and do it as two rounds of questions. If we have some time, then third round as well, perhaps. So Aritra, I'm going to start with you. Hi. Of course, you're sitting in Kolkata, which gives us a different perspective as well from where we are all seated. But then It was also nice to be able to moderate a panel with you from Kolkata and with at least two other publishing professionals who are not Delhi people, right? Am I right, Shubhi and I think Sonali as well? Both of you are not Delhi people, right? And so in that sense, there is a different, rich new perspective that you're bringing to the industry. So first of all, Aritra, from our prior discussion, I know that one of the things that is particularly important to you is is actually a problem that I think I've probably whined about 20 years ago when I joined the industry, which is that we have all these silos in the industry, and editorial is very, very often not really encouraged to engage with other departments like sales and marketing or distribution. Tell us what you feel about this, because I think you have some really, really valuable insight here.
Like, I'll start with my own example because I started as an editorial intern at Stree. When initially we start, there's an overwhelming sense of information, and often the time is like a luxury. We don't have much time to learn all this. And sales and marketing is very important for us. So in our internship program, we tend to make a new kid learn the basics, from packaging of a single book for online purchase to bulk pricing, because they have to respect each aspect of the job. But as you said, we often don't encourage the communication. And learning about design and typesetting and how we communicate with our freelancers is an important aspect. And sometimes I feel there's like a huge gap in understanding how distribution works. Because when you see a book in your hand, you don't realize how much effort has gone into like making it. But like the pricing is an essential part, and postage or like how would I say it? Sending it off is is a big part of the finance. We cannot give a certain book at discount of 40%. We cannot give another book at discount of 60%. And making it understand to an editorial intern is a bit hard, because they see the final product. So we try to make everybody part of the process, from proofreading to the final aspect. Like, as we say, they are like our children, so we take them goodbye when the books leave. And another important part would be where we do workshops with different publication houses, and like in school level and university level, because we don't see editing as a profession. Like when I started out, I did not know how to crack into this industry, but somehow I managed to understand, and I sent my CV around. So sometimes children don't see it as a future aspect. They just see it like, okay, the book just happens, somehow it just gets dropped. So I think more publication houses should go and conduct workshops and seminars, which would like encourage young readers to take this profession up.
Right, thanks, Aritra. There's lots to mull over in what you just said, because I think, flow of information, you're right, is not just about within a publishing house, but also across publishing houses, and also between publishing houses and our customers, readers, and also authors. I think there's a serious problem with flow of information in all these various directions. And I think that's something, oddly enough, that I faced even then, and it's really, really odd and interesting and difficult in a sense that you're talking about it even today, 20 years on. But Shreya, I want to bring you in at this point, because in our conversations prior to this, one of the things you spoke about in a very, very articulate manner to me was that we have to really think about whether we are making this industry attractive enough to prospective young professionals. There are just so many options out there now, and crippled by a lack of flow of information, like the way Aritra puts it. What's the plan really, and what are your thoughts on that?
So I feel that this industry is in itself quite fascinating, especially for book lovers. It's already very fascinating. Plus, with pop culture, pop culture sort of glamorized it. If not Indian movies, then the West, they've glamorized publishing. But I think there's a lot of communication gap, which we really need to bridge. And, as an industry, it's very important that we sort of keep expanding and, bringing in new individuals, diversifying ideas, because we bring out books, we need to be relevant. And for that, we need new people and fresh ideas. So, like, I agree with Aritra. I mean, I was personally very lost as well when I started. I mean, even from school times, I was really interested in the publishing industry, but I didn't know how to go about it. Like, unlike engineering or maybe, becoming a doctor, you don't have to give entrance exams to become an editor. So I think the pathway is sort of really, I mean, people just don't know how to go about it. So I think a couple of things publishing houses can do is, first of all, set up really good internship programs that hire college students regularly. I know Yoda Press has one, even Penguin Random House has it. I think all publishing houses should really adopt this. Then we should have open house days. I think, bring in young students, maybe even school students, to sort of show them how books are really made. And we can use social media effectively for this as well. This communication gap can really be bridged. And I think, I mean, there are a lot of writers out there and even freelancers who are talking about this, but I think this information needs to come from us, because we sort of have that authority. I mean, a lot of young people approach me on LinkedIn and Quora, and they are asking me, how do I also become a part of this industry? And I am helping them out, as I know a lot of publishing individuals are. But I think we need to do it more collectively, using our platform and our reach. And that's how, we'll get talented young people who don't feel lost when, they're deciding their career. They need to know exactly what they need to do to get where they want to be. So, yeah.
Right. As a matter of fact, I think this idea of having this kind of an open house is a great idea for college graduates to come in and actually get a sense of what the work means. And in a publishing house, I think the fact is that in a situation where we lack university courses and programs, barring very, very few, one in Kolkata, of course, at Jadavpur, but I can't really think of too many others. And of course, Seagull again in Kolkata, but that's a different format. I think this would be a really fantastic idea. Thank you for that, Shreya. I hope publishing houses, people from publishing houses, the decision makers will listen to this and, think about that a little. But what is the work culture inside the publishing house that, some of these young kids are going to see? And I want to come to you, Shubhi, because work cultures are so different in this diverse ecosystem. A lot of people think of it as this homogeneous thing, but it's not, is it? I mean, what do you think?
Definitely not. So I've had the opportunity of interning across a few of these formats. So in Delhi itself, you have your big five MNCs, then you've got your independents, and you've got Daryaganj Publishing, which is entirely else, and there's also academic. So all these organizational structures definitely imply that there's a huge variety in the kind of work culture that we have. And the thing is, special, and this is only, I think, limited to publishing in Delhi, but there's so much outside of it. There's, even in terms of Indian mainstream trade English publishing, there's so much more outside of Delhi, which I don't think we're tapping into, because we're a very small, close-knit community. Everyone just sort of seems to know everyone. Things are quite informal. But we're also a very globalized community, and I think we have access to a lot of culture from outside, because we have access to foreign literature markets and pockets within India itself. And I think it's time we sort of, absorbed a few of these practices. Take, for example, work from home. Now, this is something that's definitely going to be affected by COVID for sure. But an industry like publishing, which is just so open to remote working possibilities. I mean, everything that we do, practically everything is online, even the more technical side of things, not just editorial, be it printing and design. A lot of it is happening online, and yet there is a significant chunk of the industry which is very averse to such flexibility, which is sad, really, because what remote working and working from home do really is they diversify your resource pool. They make it more inclusionary and a lot less ableist. it's just an example of the kind of flexibility that we can think about. Then, for example, what Shreya said about internship programs, that is so important. What I don't understand is, so you've got, say, for example, take the Big Five and their internship programs outside in the West, in the US and the UK. They're honestly something that I've been jealous of personally throughout my journey, because I like that in India. And yet, at the same time, the Indian arms of these very publishing houses don't really have such streamlined internship programs. Take hiring and HR. I think HR is part, like, it's obviously the place from where our work culture sort of emanates, and that's essentially what keeps it going. And I think, beautiful as a community as it is, I think Indian publishing needs to be slightly more diverse, a lot less homogeneous. And yeah, I think these are things that we probably need to inculcate in our HR habits.
Yeah, and I think you said it very nicely at the end, although you made all your points. But I think the point that really sticks with me is this thing about what I've started calling it is not even work from home. I'm calling it work from anywhere. Because truthfully, we are one part of the knowledge industry, anyway lends itself more easily to that. But our industry is one that can really work productively if we thought a little more deeply about work from anywhere and how enabling, as you said, it would be for diverse employees. So thank you so much for making those points. I want to move away a little bit from talking about what it's like inside a publishing house in terms of the work culture, although, of course, this too is part of that. But what I want to talk about next, and I want to bring Sonali in for that, because I know this is a topic really close to your heart, which is that what about the work that we are doing? I mean, we're talking about what our offices look like, what our work culture is like, but what about when you guys as young publishing professionals think in terms of reading trends, or what we are picking up to publish, what we are commissioning? What do you want to tell us, boomers? I mean, sorry, I'm not going to use that again, but last time. Yeah, Sonali, over to you.
Thank you, Arpita. So this is really a topic that's quite close to my heart. And that is, we really need to read more diversely. We need to publish more diversely. And like, even as readers, we need to read more. So first of all, we all start out reading, I think, the English, properly British things in school, because that's what our syllabus is still based on. And then now there has been a great churning out of Indian texts, and not only those written in English, but also being translated into English, and that is I find completely fascinating. But also we need to tap into more markets within India. We need more books from the Northeast, from South India, from the various parts of the country, and from various time periods. And besides that, we also need more reading happening from other parts of the world. The way I see it, we are reading basically, the bestseller list of the West. And even when we read from other countries, especially the global South countries, it's those token authors that, happen to have made it to the bestseller lists and happen to have been accepted in the West. And, I personally would love to see more books in our bookstores, in our libraries, that are from other, global South countries. We can learn so much from their experiences, whether it's fiction, non-fiction. I would love to have more publishers collaborating with other, publishers from across the world. I personally try to, find out about the work that's happening, but it's not always accessible. Even if I find out about the books through like the internet, it's not always, possible, besides maybe the ebooks sometimes, but they're not always available in our bookstores. There's not much awareness about them. And I really, I'm trying to like champion this cause of reading more, and reading more like, decolonial, reading more from global South, and just getting in more diverse books from within India and from outside.
And Sonali, it really cannot be stressed, the point that you've made. And I mean, it's something that I think a lot of my students at Ashoka University bring up so often, that what is this obsession with Indian publishers with only buying rights to the bestseller, even the bestseller lit fic, there is that hierarchy, and you don't want to sort of look beyond that. You don't want to really try and sort of search harder. And the ones who do are smaller publishers, and then their books don't really sort of get that kind of reach or visibility anyway. So I think thank you for making that point. And I want to think a little more with Oritra now about what this young readership really means, because you're a young reader yourself, and when you think about, you know, what in a sense we're missing or what we can do more of, what are the things that come to your mind?
As a young reader myself, and because I run the three Instagram and Facebook page, I'm constantly like getting criticism from younger readers who are like younger than me. And as an out queer person, there's like when I was growing up reading the LBGT stuff, they were primarily Western stuff, and I did not know what was happening in India. And kind of what was off-putting for a lot of younger readers and my friends was the academic jargon, because sometimes you want to read about the lived experiences over the, I would say, coherently put together uh, academic language by an upper class caste woman. And that is the same criticism which we are getting sometimes from our younger readership, from Dalit community and from Northeastern community. And as a Northeastern, we don't have enough representation in the Indian canon of literature. And especially if you look at the reading trend right now, a lot of like good information is on Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, and like feminism has taken a new form. Though I have got some like I would say complaints from older readers, like in their 30s, who say that feminism has been hijacked by the corporate culture. But that's not true. It is just becoming more accessible with help of social media. And I would like go with Shreya and like who is running Wattpad. I write fan fictions on Wattpad. And when like I interact with fellow readers on Wattpad who are like commenting on my stories and I'm commenting on other stories, they're like children, like 13, 14, who want to know about topics such as migration, and they are writing stories about migration, but they don't have the access to the lived experience. So like the major complaint is about not having enough representation of lived experiences. And and we have to like look beyond the academic I would say hierarchy, because there are a lot of professionals from IT, then from medical, who are like experiences their own marginalization, but they don't have that training in writing, but we have to give them an opportunity to come and speak and write for themselves. So what we are actually thinking of doing certain workshops, interacting with young people and calling them in our office to see what they want. So that is the primary aim right now, that to bring more younger readers and listen to them and what they want, like give them the platform to speak up and write. And I think blogging is a very good aspect for this. So we are thinking of a Stree blog to like give the younger readers a chance.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Wattpad, because I mean, it's been. I remember. I mean, the year Wattpad was being launched, or just a few months before, I heard about it for the first time at the Singapore Writers Festival. That must be, I don't know, 6 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, or am I, you know, is it less than that? And even now, I'm amazed when we go to seminars and conferences of publishing people. I'm amazed when people say, "What is Wattpad?" And you know, I think there is a serious lacuna here with just not knowing what is available in terms of the possibilities, and constantly looking at it as something that, oh, it'll be used by people who are not really writers, and you're dismissing them without understanding the change that has occurred in the meantime. Shubhi, I want to ask you the next question, which is, of course, related to what happens in our offices and the sort of books that we are encouraged, or we feel enabled to sort of suggest or commission or bring in or invite. A lot of it also starts with young people in the offices feeling empowered and feeling like they are sort of, they have a kind of trajectory, which is to do with the golden word you used in your email to me, which was mentorship. What are your thoughts on mentorship in the publishing industry in India?
I know it's something that's really close to your heart, Arpita, and as it is for, I think, anyone who's managed to enter the industry despite not knowing anyone from it or not having a background in publishing, because it's just quite difficult. And I think this stems directly from a dearth of opportunities with training, internship, and mentorship. So you, like you said, there are like the amount of courses available you can count on your hand. But publishing and editorial, it's such an immersive experience. It's not really something you can learn from a lecture or a course. So which is why that's where internships come into the picture. And it's just, while I personally do have benefited from internship programs in India, fortunately they do exist. I just don't think there's enough of them, or that they're streamlined enough. And having said that, I think Shreya's already made some really wonderful points regarding internships and how imperative it is that publishers start contributing to a more streamlined internship program. Even if it's a collaboration, if you're too small, you think you can't manage one by yourself, collaborate with a course, collaborate with NBT. But then there's the third round which comes into the picture, and that's mentorship, because an internship or a course only takes you so far. It's more about the technical side of things. You can teach me to copy, edit, but there is so much more to editorial, and especially when you go further and you go in the direction of commissioning, and that is where it comes to the picture, because that is where you're influencing the kind of titles that are going out on people's bookshelves. And obviously a person's personal sense of what needs to be out there, the kind of writers that we have, the voices that we need to get published, is very important. But at the same time, mentorship not only teaches you how publishing in the industry works, makes it easier for you to sort of navigate those around those potholes and just concentrate on your work more. They really do help you figure out and shape these voices that need to be out there. So it's just so important. And it's not just mentorship, because mentorship makes it sound like there's an element of spoon feeding involved. But I think what I'm really referring to is a two-way dialogue and some sort of exposure that perhaps the younger professionals could benefit from. And it's not just they who will be benefiting, because I think that two-way dialogue benefits the industry as a whole. There's just more voices, more representation that way. But it really gives, I think, the seniors at these publishing houses to sort of help shape the future of that very publishing house and figure out who these new editors, or just not just editors, anyone at a publishing house, and how they'll be shaping everything that's going on our bookshelves.
One of the things you mentioned in your email that I found really interesting was what was the exact phrase you used, which I thought I'm going to use in my seminar papers. What barriers to skill transfer? No, barriers to inclusionary skill transfer. Wow. Tell us about that.
So it starts even from an internship. So for example, we already lack internship opportunities and streamline ones. But what we absolutely do not have, perhaps, barring one or two opportunities, is a paid internship or an internship with a stipend. Now, what this essentially means is that even if I somehow manage to get through to your HR, manage to land an opportunity interning at your place, what I cannot do is intern if I don't have these resources to fund myself, fund my boarding, lodging, all of that. And that is, in a way, exclusionary. It is discriminatory, because it assumes that only a person who's capable of funding themselves, or who comes from a background where they can do so, is entitled to an opportunity of such. Or perhaps entitled is a very pompous word, but just the access to an opportunity of this sort. This is the first level. And then you have other events. Now you have while I think there are few mixers and opportunities for younger publishers to mingle, what you do have are these conferences or lit fests where everyone from publishing sort of comes together. And yet when some of these events are behind bars, like say if they're by invite only, or if they're priced at, say for example, a conference in another city is not something that I'm going to be able to afford. It's definitely not on a young publishing professional salary, for sure. So either an organization funds me, my organization funds me, and that's only going to happen if they think that this young person is worthy of going there, which happens very rarely. It's generally the senior executives who are going to be going. So I do feel that anyone who's not coming from a privileged enough background and then later on is just too young, will not be able to benefit from a lot of the events that we're having already.
Right. Yeah. It would really be refreshing to see more young people at publishing events like Publishing Next in Goa or JLF in Jaipur. And frankly, I'd even wager, I mean, now, of course, the rules of travel are going to change even more, but how much, young people would not, we always say young people would learn, but I think so much more that young people would imbibe and offer to us would sensitize us to seeing more clearly if they were even in a place like Frankfurt, So yeah, I think that's
And
really important.
yeah, that's the thing. So Frankfurt and a few other places outside have fellowships for young publishers. I recently heard of someone who's going to Istanbul for something of the sort. So similar programs in India could really, I mean, it's a win-win for both the publishing house and the young professionals.
Absolutely. And the fellowships are there for a lot of book fairs across the world, but then um, there is that other part of it that has to be covered, right? Within an office, an editor can't just go and apply for the fellowship. I mean, you do need your boss's support because the boss is going to recommend you. So a lot more of that has to happen, obviously, right? But even as we are talking about the formats and the work culture and what could make our position sort of as or your position as young editors, as I keep saying, the ship has sailed on me being called young. But for you guys to feel like, I mean, your sort of trajectory in the publishing industry is clearer. You don't feel tempted to take on some other option because hey, it's just not exciting enough, or you're not being enabled enough over here. Apart from all of that, I think one of the things that also always excites us is what we are publishing, right? Young people join this industry because they really believe in reading and believe in books, and all of that has to do with what we are publishing. And I'm going to come back to Sonali for this one, because I know this is again something very close to her heart. These are strange, sort of tough times we're in, and not just because of the lockdown. Um, as someone who's always concerned about what we should be commissioning, what kind of literature we should be commissioning, what are your thoughts?
Arpita, I think you've put it really well that, if you join publishing, it is because you believe in the power of books and you believe in their power to, change people and, circumstances in whatever small way. And I do think that, as a publishing industry and as a community, we need to also respond to the, the situations that are around us. And it's just like one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is how much like what we can do to help communities and religions and people of all classes and backgrounds live better and more harmoniously, and we need a more tolerant society, and we know that more and more this is not the case worldwide. And which is related to the point that I had said earlier, that we need to read from around the world. We need to read from people from all parts of the world and not just the West that we see more of. And even within India, we need to read from all over the country. We need to tap into histories where we've seen that we've been one community and we've lived together and harmoniously and with syncretic cultures for all of these hundreds of years. Why don't we have books that are published, and if they're already published, then why don't we promote more of those books about Sufi and Bhakti traditions, which while we do know of at some level, I find that especially in the younger generation, that's not a knowledge that's prevalent. And it's just all of these things. And again, breaking down this binary of the West and India on one side, learning more about how different cultures have influenced us, how we don't end at the borders of our nations. Our cultural contributions and influences reach out. We don't even read enough from our immediate neighbors. And like, what does that say? Like, how much are we learning? How much are we prone to be influenced by the one opinion or the political opinion that will come in, rather than having books that would make us see other people as just people? Or what about reading about Arabic philosophers for one, in just random instance, and how, everyone has influenced the culture that's in. It's not like there's only the West that has gone in. Sorry, I keep harping on about that, but like that's just something I really believe in. How I might say one sentence with one Persian word, one Arabic word, one Hindi word, and one English word, and what contributions that Indians themselves have made in our recent past. The fact that the word boson, like the Higgs boson comes from Satyendranath Bose. That was something I was very surprised to discover a couple years ago, and I'm just, very surprised that we don't know more about this. Why is it that all of these WhatsApp forwards have to go back to like thousands of years to talk about like contributions of or greatness of India or Indians? And it's just something that, as a publishing industry, by making more accessible books, more books that are being able to be read by younger audiences especially, I think we would really contribute to the way people are thinking about ourselves and the world.
Right, really important point, Sonali. And I just want to do a jump back to Aritra because of that point. Because Aritra, since you work with a publishing house, which is an independent publishing house that publishes a lot of academic work, do you think what Sonali is talking about is also connected with, the fact that there have been these books, but they've been so full of, there have been these fantastic books which fall in the category of what she's describing, but by very great anthropologists, historians, but they're sort of written in that one register. They're academically very, very respectable books. But are they accessible, and do we have to do something more interesting now without dumbing this content down? Right? I'm sorry to use the word content. Yeah.
I wouldn't say dumbing down per se. It is like, I would say, like, we have to explore another way of like writing. The language has to change. And yes, accessibility is a big problem, because one of the major complaints that we get about our books on anthropology and history is that they are very expensive for young readers. And students who students from the lower strata and like lower income group cannot afford our books. Most of the time they complain about it. So now we are trying to get into the ebook market, because Stree has been primarily known for its niche market, and we have always aimed for a readership which has been either part of academia or has been related to academia. But now we are trying to do cost-effective ebooks, which would not hamper the purse of a young reader, and would not actually stock up the space in the warehousing, because we know how difficult it is to get warehousing space these days. And we are trying to redo some of our books which needs updating. And generally we have this peer review culture where we send our books to eminent scholars who read about it. But now we are asking students in their masters, in their graduations, to give a look into the chapters when we are editing them, and we want to see if they understand this language, and if this language can be accessed by a little younger reader, who are 18, to just have passed out from their school. So primary aim is to simplify language. Like Ruskin Bond says, the aim is not to make it dumb, but aim for clarity of language. What is the major complaint? Me being an editor of academic books, I personally find this academic jargon is very, it's like a wall that Trump wants to build, and but it's a dividing procedure. So I personally feel that we have to aim for a simplified language, so that the kids can come on this side and they can contribute, and older scholars can understand that that what the younger reader wants. Because after 50 years, this young reader is going to be the consumer, and they will be teaching their younger generation. So the aim is for clarity of language, because this young generation is very curious and they want to learn a lot, but they don't particularly care about punctuation or syntax. The aim is, as you said, content. They want a clear content, and if they understand it from bullet points, why not make books in bullet points for them? So now it's we have to rejuvenate this entire independent industry. So I am trying, and we are getting more interns who are helping us. Let's see.
Right. Actually, that's very interesting that you're, almost trying to gauge consumer behavior by sort of showing your manuscripts to young people in colleges. I think that is really invaluable kind of insight that you can get to how these changes can be made. I must say I'm still too old-fashioned to appreciate writing without syntax or punctuation, as Shubhi and Sonali know particularly well. But I'm learning because I have a daughter, and who keeps sort of telling me you have a lot to learn. But I want to come back to Shreya at that point to pick up what she was talking about, which is so connected to all of this, which is that it's all about storytelling, and that we have so many more storytelling formats available to us today, which a lot of us who are in decision-making spaces in the publishing industry, we're not looking at, perhaps because we are uncomfortable, but we're not looking at, which is why we need to listen to you guys. Tell us, Shreya.
Yeah, so basically, we're not, as publishers, we're really more focused on print, and now slowly we're, focusing on ebooks since the pandemic, and even audiobooks are on the rise, but there's so much more out there. We've already discussed Wattpad, and I think it's a platform that we really need to look at, because there's a thriving community of readers out there. But I mean, I'm astounded by the kind of engagement you will see there, and the texts and the books there are not really very highbrow or literary or even that complex. They're really simply written, but you can actually see genuine passion and love. And I think we're missing out on these readers. And and it's not like, once upon a time I used to feel that, Wattpad is just going to be that. It's going to be a community where people just write stories or fan fiction. But it has grown. People are actually earning money through it. I've earned money through it. So they have a revenue model in place. Then there are other platforms that have come up. Actually, there's this platform called Tap. It's actually by Wattpad too. It's basically text stories. So instead of having a narrator in place, you just see a mobile screen and you see two or more people just texting each other. You just see the text messages, and when you tap, you see what happens next. I actually read this horror story in form of a text where a group of friends challenged this guy to like go into these tunnels. So he was just texting them what he's seeing, and there were a lot of cliffhangers there. And if he was seeing something, he was sending them photos and videos. So I think that's another way they've changed. Another platform I remember is Episode. It's a choice-based gaming app, which also tells a story. So it's like a comic come alive, basically. So you see the characters on the screen. You'll see them interacting with each other through the dialogues. And basically, you'll even have music in the background. And they've brought in this element of choice in there. So the reader becomes a character. The reader can decide what happens in the story next by choosing what the character says or does. And all these apps I'm telling you about are earning money. So, I mean, this is something we're really missing out on, because, I mean, we all grew up in an era with paper and we were sent out to play. But the younger generation now, they grew up with screens. And they grew up with good Wi-Fi connections with multiple devices in their home. So like their sense of perception is very visual and sensory. And I think the attention span of young people has also really reduced. And I think if we need to stay relevant, I mean, of course, paperbacks are always going to remain relevant, but I think we're really missing out on potential readership by not adapting alternative modes of storytelling.
I just want to, before we end, I just want to get a sense of what's kept you guys going during the lockdown. It could be a book, an app, a show on an OTT, or a game. I'll go first. What I'm watching is something called The Woods, which is this really gory murder mystery thriller on Netflix. And I've started rereading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. As I said earlier, guilty pleasures are allowed. Who wants to go next? Sonali?
Sure. Well, I've been stuck in the lockdown in my parents' house, which I'm quite grateful for, honestly. And there's two things that have kept me going. I think one, we have like these weekly movie nights where sometimes it's our choice and our parents are just like, what the hell is this? Sorry. And sometimes it's theirs, and we're just sort of trying to understand where this came from. And there's also two books that I've been reading and I'm still reading, which have just blown my mind. And that's one of them is by Yoda Press, actually, Gandhi's Tiger and Sita's Smile. And the other one, coincidentally, is Roli Books, and that is Anthems of Resistance. And it's both of them where it was so much more information that I did not know about, and it's Indian and it's just wonderful.
Thank you, Aritra.
I'm writing a lot of fan fictions and reading out children's stories to my cat. So that has been helping me throughout the lockdown. So he loves reading one story a night and then he falls asleep.
Lovely. Shubhi, what about you?
I've been guzzling down content in all forms. So I've introduced my parents to Netflix. So like Sonali said, that is a really fun journey. I've managed to finish my Goodreads challenge for the year already. But one recommendation definitely is Stephen Fry's Mythos. I've been listening to the audiobook on Audible and it's just brilliant. The narration is so good. Also, everyone should definitely watch Occupied on Netflix. Again, Norwegian sort of noir, very political, interesting thriller.
Okay, that's the next one on my list. Shreya?
Yeah, so I've been reading a lot of genre fiction, especially horror and, murder mysteries. So that, plus a lot of like dark themed TV shows, Black Mirror, and like reading dystopian books. And then Dark, that's a really good sci-fi show, right? Yeah, and I've just been, it's brilliant. So I've just been obsessed with these dark elements, which is like really weird. But I think fiction just sort of gives you a sense of control. You can escape out of this world and you just feel, okay, I'm safe in this dark world. So that's how I've been coping.
Excellent. Yeah. Chirag, what about you?
Well, I finished reading Ocean Vuong's On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous.
Oh, I love that book.
I also finished Normal People, and I'm waiting to the adaptation. And I didn't want to start watching the show before I read the book, and everybody talked about it, so I read it. I'm also binge watching Succession on HBO on Hotstar. It's this insane show about this media mogul.
Guilty pleasure 101, baby.
Yeah, and what else? I'm really looking forward to Midnight's Children's adaptation. Hopefully this year it drops. And I'm listening to Amit Verma's Seen and Unseen, a podcast that you should all check out if you haven't already.
Wow. So these should be some really fabulous recommendations for everyone. I know I've been making note of all of them. And really, guys, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to all of you and for you to have shared so generously and uninhibitedly about, what you'd like to see in the industry, what you love about the industry, and what keeps you in this industry. And I really hope that everyone watches this, everyone in the industry watches this, young people outside the industry watch it, and they want to join this industry because of this panel. Yeah. Thank you, Chirag, as well, because, unless the tech happens properly and unless your very stolid supporting face is there, I think we all feeling nervous. So thank you for that. And before I sign out, I must tell you all that to follow Roli Books on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates on more exciting activities from Roli Pulse. And as you know, we are seeing some really, really brilliant programming on Roli Pulse. And of course, from one reading and books lover to another, stay well and believe in books. Thank you all. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.